Now we're going to sit down with Ming of Brother Ming Games to talk about their 1v1 asymmetrical dueling game, React, the Arts of War. All right, thank you so much for sitting down with us. Why don't you tell us about React, the Arts of War?
Yeah, so React, the Arts of War is a 1 versus 1, highly competitive, very, very asymmetrical dueling game. Where you and your opponent are each going to be picking one of 8 different characters in the game to play as. And the theme of this game is that all of the characters are different types of artists, hence why it's called the Arts of War.
Got it.
So here in this demo setup, we have the calligrapher versus the DJ. So the calligrapher, who is our main character, she's got a katana with a sheath that's also a giant ink brush. She can use that ink brush to splash ink on her summons or her opponents, and anybody she's splashed with ink, she can then write out commands with her ink brush to make them do her bidding.
Okay.
Of course, the way she wins is by summoning these little critters, which she calls her ink spirits. And even though they're very weak, they can only move one space or attack an adjacent space. She has 4 of them, so she can easily swarm the whole board and corner you. On the opposite side, we have the DJ, who is a highly aggressive character who fights using sick beats. So she's got these 2 turntables and several beat cards, and when she drops a beat, that triggers a on-start effect, while on the other side, and at the start of each turn, her beats also will advance, and when a beat ends, that also triggers an on-end effect. She has 4 beats, but only 2 of these turntables, so she has a limited number of spaces for those she can play those. And when she commits to a beat, she also has to wait for an end before she can play a new one. So kind of like a bard character, she basically is managing these time segment abilities.
Okay.
The way she wins and the way she deals damage is by summoning these big honking speakers. And the way these speakers deal damage is by using the power of sound waves. Whenever you tap the speakers to attack, they will launch sonic waves down both directions, the X and Y axis. And wherever those sonic waves intersect, that is where you deal damage.
Okay.
So basically, constructive interference. So if you want to deal damage to me here, you want to have a speaker somewhere in her row and a speaker somewhere in her column. And when they meet, that's going to where it deals damage.
Okay.
Sometimes you get a double whammy, hit both spaces at once. Of course, you can also put both speakers in the same row, and it'll deal damage to the entire row, but it also deal damage to the speakers themselves.
Okay, so there is friendly fire.
Yeah, so the way the game plays is at its core a card game. So while all the characters are all very asymmetric, all of the abilities are going to be played off of cards.
Okay.
So in the game, there are 2 core types of cards, which are blue cards and orange cards. So blue cards, which are these, are called intention cards. So you see the word intention in front of it. And the other type of card is, of course, reaction cards, aka the name of the game, React. So on your turn, the turn player can play intention cards to start a chain, and then your opponent and you can then play reaction cards to react to other reaction cards or the intention card. So, are you familiar with games like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Magic?
A little bit, yeah.
Oh, so in those games, in traditional TCGs, there's what we call a stack or effect chain.
Sure.
So in this game, we're calling it the reaction chain, affectionately, because it's called React. And we're trying to bring this mechanic to board gamers. And as far as I know, no board games use the reaction chain. And a big part of that is because it is a very complicated system, and it's kind of old school in terms of the design mentality, and that this is a very unforgiving system. So when people say board games, oh, this game is so unforgiving, oh, this game is so brutal, they're usually talking about bad luck or random events that are very harsh. In this game, the game system of a stack is very unforgiving in that it doesn't care that you play cards wrong.
Right.
You can play cards and they can do nothing because you don't really understand what you're doing. If you play cards willy-nilly, they're your only resource. You only draw 1 card per turn, but you can play as many cards as you want every single turn. So just like in Yu-Gi-Oh, you can dump your whole hand and effectively lose the game because everything in this game comes down to value. Am I playing less cards than my opponents to do the damage that they want to do?
Okay.
So coming back to this, explaining what a stack is in Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh! Once a stack is ready to resolve, the stack resolves backwards.
Right. Last played
yes.
to first played.
First in, last out. So when this begins resolving, 4 resolves first, then 3 resolves, then 2, and finally 1. So the twist on the Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic stack that we call in the reaction chain is that, of course, this game is played on a grid. So that changes a lot of things because, say my little dude is trying to make an attack against you who is adjacent to him. When he makes that attack, the attack tells him to exhaust himself, so tapping like in Magic,
Sure.
and then target an adjacent zone. So you pick up this target token and actually mark the zone you're about to attack.
Okay.
Well, that means as a reaction, you can then react to that and move yourself out of the way. So by the time the attack resolves, nothing is there for you to hit anymore.
Sure.
So, unlike in Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh, where there are hand traps or hard negates or counter spells, there's no hard negates in this game. Everything is about counterplay and actually dodging the attacks.
I see.
All right, so that is everything you need to know about how to play the game.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and go over a quick example. So, say your character is trying to secure some damage on me right here. So, you might go, well, the speakers, they need to tap themselves in order to deal damage.
Okay.
But currently, they're only damaging these spaces. Well, you could, instead of just playing it and hitting nothing, or spending a bunch of moves to try to move here and then attack, you could attack and then play Electric Slide. This card has a cost of choose a direction. You'll choose this direction, and when this resolves, they'll say move a speaker any number of spaces in the chosen direction. So this is now on the stack. So now, if we look at how this is going to resolve, when this resolves, you can move this speaker all the way down here. This resolves, and now when this attack resolves, you're going to hit these two spaces, dealing damage to me. Well, now I realize that might be happening,
Sure.
so I might go in and react to myself before we let this resolve. I might play Flowing Ink, my reaction card, which also has me choose a direction. And this lets me ink any one summon, and then once it's inked, once it resolves, everything that's inked moves one space in that chosen direction. So unlike you, where you're moving one thing at a time, my thing lets me ink a bunch of things on the board. So I might say, okay, I do this. Now, if you don't have any more reactions, and I don't have any more reactions, I've won this interaction. We let this resolve. This resolves first. So I'm going to go ahead and ink this and this, or this. Now, everything that's been inked moves one space this way. So this guy moves. We'll say this wasn't inked, right?
Sure.
This, once it's resolved, cards that resolve simply go away forever. Now your card resolves. You can move any one speaker any number of directions this way, but it's irrelevant. You're never going to get me your crosshairs again. So you say you move there, and now very unfortunately, the attack resolves. Remember what I said about if they're both in the same column? It deals damage to that entire column, including themselves and you.
Okay.
So basically, you wasted cards, lost your speakers, and hurt yourself.
Okay, so you just flipped over this. So this
Yes.
was actually the next question I was going to ask.
Oh, yes.
Is that I'm assuming that this represents our character's health.
Yeah,
right?
so the goal of the game is simply to deal 3 damage and you win. So it's a very, very fast game.
Okay.
In addition to these tracking your damage, this is the last piece of the puzzle. These cards are called masterpiece cards. No matter how asymmetric this game gets, every character always has 3 masterpiece cards.
Got it.
And they work like super meters. So as you play the game, you're gonna be putting, whenever you progress your masterpiece, you're gonna put one of these cards into an empty space.
Okay.
If there are no more empty spaces, you can replace a card with one of your cards.
Okay.
And if all your cards are already played, you can then swap 2 cards. The goal, of course, is to get your 3 cards connected in a row, and that completes your masterpiece, allowing your character card to ascend, unlocking your finishing ultimate moves. Just like in any fighting game, there has to be a super meter and a super
Sure.
move. We've just combined that super meter with a tic-tac-toe system.
Okay. And then take a step back real quick. When we're playing our actions and our reacts, what's the timing windows on being able to play those cards? So let's say I play an action, right?
Yeah.
Is it then my react? Is it your react? Who gets priority in that situation?
Yes, priority. I love that
Yeah.
word because that comes from a TCG background. And that's something that's kind of hard to explain to board gamers. And we have condensed everything that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has failed to explain into a very simple chart. The turn player plays an intention. The opponent now has priority. The opponent can either play a reaction or pass, and now you have priority. Now you can react or pass, and now your opponent has priority. And this is going to go back and forth, back and forth. So priority simply keeps passing anytime somebody either passes or plays a card until both players has passed and the chain begins resolving.
So on our channel, one of the TCGs that we do a lot of content for is actually the Universes
Oh, nice.
TCG, which has a similar timing system as this,
Nice.
where it is that I can pass, you can respond, I can pass, you can respond. The door doesn't close until we both pass in succession.
Exactly.
All right, so that I am familiar with, and that is something that I absolutely love. So let's talk about, so now that we understand how the game plays out and stuff like that, let's talk about what the reaction has been so far here at the convention.
Oh, it's been great. It feels like everybody who sat down to play it has absolutely loved it. And it's just a challenge, a matter of setting people into the right mindset.
Sure.
Because if you have a couple who sit down and has never played anything hyper competitive or hyper thinky, where you can just play a bunch of cards and they all do nothing, you really have to set them the mind frame. It's like, hey, think about it before you start doing things.
Yeah.
Because a lot of board gamers are very used to these days. Oh, let me just do things and see what happens.
Sure.
And most board games are guardrailed against letting that be a terrible experience.
Yeah.
Even in games as complicated as Root, if you look at the factions, most of them are like, okay, well, on your turn, if you're the squirrels or the main ones, the orange ones, you can take 3 actions. You can build, you can recruit, or you can move.
Yeah.
That's it. And all of those are more or less beneficial activities.
Yeah.
They're moving you towards some goal that gets you victory points. In this game, you can do whatever you want. You can play any number of cards in your turn, or you can just pass every turn. And you can play every single card and punch air. A good analogy I like to make is like in a fighting game, you can button mash, just waste your entire time away while your opponent is pulling off cool combos and punching you in the face.
Yeah.
This game doesn't prevent you from punching to air. And that, as long as I can get somebody into the right mindset and they realize, oh, when they see that they did something wrong and they have that moment of clarity of like, oh, I see how I could have sequenced these cards differently to have a totally different outcome, then I know I can get them because they want to play again.
Sure. And what's the average play session like?
It takes about 15 to 30 minutes. Okay. We have ran 3 tournaments so far. Yeah. And when we do a tournament, we do 60-minute rounds, best 2 out of 3. Okay. So most people can play 2 to 3 games in an hour.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. And then where can people pick up the game now?
Yeah, so the game is available for the very first time at PAX Unplugged. After this, it is currently available on my website, brotherminggames.com. I'm an indie small publisher, and this is my first original game, so I don't have a retail distribution network or anything like that. But the benefit of that means this retail edition, which is only $60, is very, very jam-packed. There's no waste of space. I'm not trying to hog up shelf space to provide a sense of value. Feel free to feel how heavy this is.
Oh, I mean, that's dense.
It is dense. There's no waste of space. For only $60, you get all 8 playable characters. What you don't get is the playmat or the acrylic standees. Okay. So for $60, what you're going to be using instead is a standard cardboard game board. And instead of using acrylic standees, you're going to be using these tiles to move them around the board. Okay. Now, if you want the acrylic standees and the playmats, which, functionally, they're the same thing, but they look so much better. Yeah. It's only $40 more. Okay. So for $100, you're gonna get all 8 characters in a bigger box, which is right over there, and it's gonna come with 28 acrylic standees and 2 playmats. So it's a very good value.
Awesome. And I will say, I asked you earlier about the reaction to it. When we were setting up and you stepped away for a second, we had, I'm not kidding you, 3 or 4 people stop by and ask if we were giving demos right now of the game.
Oh, that's incredible.
I do think it helps that one of the things I love about this game is the art style that you've chosen for this, these fighting games. It is a very, I think you guys describe it as an original anime IP.
I gotta give shout outs, credits to Wicked Alucard and Pat Roland, Locksticks. They're incredible artists. They've worked on 3 of my previous art projects. I do a lot of collaborative art projects like tarot decks, and I'm very, very proud of this art book. So before I started on this project, I had already commissioned over 300 different artists. So when we come to think about theme, I was like, well, we have to make a game about artists with superpowers. All sorts of different types of artists in the world.
All right, and then real quick, before I let you go, why? Why decide to make this game?
I wanted to make this game for myself because there's no game like it on the market. It is a punishing, incredibly thinky, incredibly competitive, and fast game. It's very cheap, doesn't require collecting, and scratches that Yu-Gi-Oh part of my brain without having me to know thousands of different cards and learn all the current meta decks that are constantly switching out. So really, that's why I wanted to make this game.
Yeah, and you mentioned it being one of the things that you like about it is it being punishing. I think one of the benefits of it being a 15 to 30 minute game that even if you do get punished the one time out, at least you're not being held captive for an hour and a half, 2 hours. And I think that is super, super smart. And it is punishing, but also rewarding,
yes.
right?
Yeah,
And
the fun of this game, I like to tell people, is in the mastery, not in the discovery. So in a lot of games, you'll have a deck of cards, but you go into it not really knowing what they're gonna do. And the fun of it is like, Arc Nova. It's like, whoa, I can get this. Whoa, this card does what? And every turn to turn, you're looking at your new cards and going, ooh, I wonder how this can interact with my current gameplay. In this game, the fun is not in discovery, but in mastery, because every single character's deck only has 4 different cards. So once you know your 4 cards, you know your whole deck, you know you're gonna learn everything your character can do, technically, very quickly, but you're gonna start peeling back the layers of how they can do things well. Yeah. And that's where the fun is.
So it also becomes, and you compared it to fighting games earlier today with the Super Meter, it is a situation where like anybody can pick up and play a fighting game, right? But to master it, it's knowing your character kit, but then also your opponent's character kit, and learning the matchups and how to counteract that. And so I think that's super smart that it is, I don't want to say limited, but they're streamlined decks, and so you can get that interaction.
We also have these handy dandy reference cards that you'll hand to your opponent. So this card lists out all, summarizes all the different cards and ability you have. You give that to your opponent, and when they flip it, it also has several paragraphs describing how to best face that character.
Super smart.
So your first game is very easy to set up. And the best thing about this is if you don't like card games, we also have stuff for you. There's 8 characters in the base game. 2 of them don't even use decks. So one of them, for example, is an animator. So the animator is an action programming character for people who are more familiar with board games. Yeah. The animator summons, he summons the 12 FPS Chan, 24 FPS Kun, and for his ultimate, he summons 60 FPS Sama. And instead of playing cards, the animator is going to be putting down animation frames, like throwing frames, running frames, and punching frames. And whenever he animates, those frames will trigger and make his dolls perform punches. So he literally action programs sequencing for what he can do on his turn. On the other hand, we also have a character that's more traditional for board gamers, the painter, who uses dice. So every turn, instead of drawing cards, you roll dice, add those to your pool of unspent dice, and you can spend those dice to fuel the abilities of your sword, shield, and bow, the different faces of your dice. So she's a much more traditional board game style character, where you're just rolling dice and being like, okay, here's what I can do, and you kind of feel like more lucky. So we try to cater to every single play style.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out. And you said this is available now at your website, brotherminggames.com, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And thank you so much again.
Yeah, appreciate it.
And until next time, bye-bye.
Wait, don't go. Hold on. Ooh, all right, sorry. Hey, if you like what you just saw, please don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on how to plays, live plays, reviews, and unboxings, and all the tabletop goodness we've got coming up. All right, now you can go.